It is 28 years after the fall of apartheid.
Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another.
And yet South Africa is more divided than ever.
South Africa is descending into further chaos. 6 days on, looting and rioting continuing in the country. The violence has now claimed over 70 lives.
It's painful for me to say that, but it's the truth. The city of Joburg is in ruins.
I apologize to all of South Africa for such a disgrace being the president of our country.
Some have now started to blame the very system itself.
And actually somehow we've got to cobble all these separate interests into somehow to turn them into one force. We don't. We just have to let those people govern themselves. Let the people govern themselves the way they want. And don't make everybody have to club together to try and find the lowest common denominator of an unworkable coalition, because it's going to be a disaster.
It makes me sad to listen to Phil, because it makes me realize that there are people who've given up on South Africa. I think that South Africa is still a country that has got hope and has got opportunity.
We just feel that it's very important in the Western Cape to set the example for the rest of the country that we can work together in spite of coming from different faiths, different positions, different beliefs.
To many, there is a pain that has never been healed.
So therefore, we will never support federalism at all, because that is apartheid on its own. So therefore, please, don't bring us back to apartheid. We will never go back there. Never.
There is a pain that has never been understood.
Can I ask, why do you keep seeing me as a white person and not just a person? I'm just a person. Yeah, I do. And every time you talk about me, you keep talking about a white person. I'm just a person.
There is a pain that has never been rectified.
Sometimes it just happens that you don't want to live in a society where you're governed by the majority rule.
Be careful. Be careful. This is a compromise. There was a compromise in this country.
I don't understand the nature of these conversations or querying about whether or not federation is supposed to transpire. South Africa is, legally speaking, a federal state.
I am on the ground. I'm seeing what's happening in our communities. I'm seeing the shacks. I'm seeing the lack of education, not just in Cape Town, right through this country.
There is only one race to which we all belong, and that race is the human race. There is no race which is superior than the other, and there is no race which is inferior than the other.
To those watching from the future, the year is 2022, and South Africa is teetering on the brink of collapse. In response, the Western Cape Devolution Working Group has been formed with the support of many organizations like the Democratic Alliance, Cape Forum, Action Society, AfriForum, many organizations, including one organization that is represented here today, the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, CIG, represented by Mr. Phil Craig. The intention of this organization is to try and devolve powers, decentralized powers, to the Western Cape. In response, many say that the Western Cape Devolution Working Group is extremists. They're right-wing, they're trying to divide us, they're trying to bring back apartheid, they're trying to bring back Bantustans. So which is right? Is federalism, the Western Cape Devolution Working Group, a good idea, or is it a terrible idea? To answer, we have a very exciting panel. Phil Craig is the spokesperson and co-founder of the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, CIG. Phil also goes by the code name 006 because, of course, Phil Craig is Daniel Craig's brother, the actor who plays James Bond. So he's obviously here to debate federalism, but he's also here to promote his latest movie in which he stars You Never Die Twice Unless I Kill You First. So I can't wait to hear him talk about what it was like working with Catherine Zeta-Jones and Leon Schuster. Almost said Leon Schreiber, but Leon Schuster. The movie is now number 2 on Bok Radio's training list, right behind the number 1 movie, which is, of course, Hou Vas My Perd, Maar Los My Queer. Then we have Michelle Wasserman. She is the former deputy mayor and speaker of NAISNA, representing the DA, the Democratic Alliance. In the previous debate, I made the mistake of not saying that Atul Trollip has switched parties. I'm not going to make the same mistake in this debate. Michelle has since become disillusioned with the Democratic Alliance. She has joined Action SA and she has become the Western Cape chairperson of Action SA. Genief Hendricks is a very interesting individual. He's a South African politician, businessman, lecturer, and a teacher who is a member of the National Assembly of South Africa, a member of Parliament. He is one of the founding members of the Muslim Students Association of South Africa and the founder and the current leader of Jama-ah, the party for upholding Muslim interests in South Africa. Phil, is the Western Cape Devolution Working Group federalism, is it a good idea?
Thanks, Donald, and thanks to Michelle and Genief for this opportunity to discuss Cape federalism. And whilst I'm a secessionist, I'm not at this stage going to get wrapped up in the differences between secession and federalism, because precisely the same two concepts are at the very heart of both ideas. So what are these concepts? Well, firstly, we're not all the same. We're different. And South Africa is an extraordinarily diverse country, and many of us want fundamentally different things. And the evidence for this is overwhelming, and nowhere is it more apparent than in our election results. And in the 3 decades of the so-called democratic era, the majority of Western Cape voters have never once voted for the ANC, whilst the majority of voters in every other province, with the exception of KZN in 1994, have never voted for anybody else but the ANC. And this then brings us to our second concept, that groups of people, including the people of the Western Cape, have an absolute right, which is enshrined in law, to be governed according to their own freely chosen policy. And this, of course, is the right to self-determination. And federalism is simply an administrative means by which people who are fundamentally different can each exercise their right to self-determination while still living together in a larger state. The question then becomes, is it better to have one large state or several smaller ones? But that, of course, is an argument for another day. And for now, let's just ask, why is this right to self-determination so important? Well, the alternative is allowing one group to dominate and force its will upon all the other groups around it, and you end up right back where we started, with a dominant political party or power in Pretoria, which does not act in the best interests of everybody. And the very obvious reality here is that allowing the South African national government to run the Western Cape has been an unmitigated disaster for the people of this province. And our lives would have been fundamentally better if we'd been able to govern ourselves.
The founder of Islam, Sheikh Yusuf, an exiled resistance fighter from Indonesia, got a presidential award as a South African hero, who today would have fought against the Western Cape seceding from South Africa to become a colonial-like white-led 55th country in Africa. I have raised in Parliament the question of secession that came up during the election campaigns, and I asked, why are the people who are calling for secession not charged with treason and thrown in jail? So that is Jama-ah's position, that people gave their lives. PAC members from this finishing were hanged. And we know, for example, that the fight against apartheid was also a fight for one nation. And during apartheid, we had the CRC, we had the Indian Council, and as a youngster, I said one day, when we have liberation, all those who are members of the CRC who are still living, and the Indian Council and the Bantustans must be hanged, because we don't need some such people in this country. Now, there are such people now emerging. I'm not saying you must be hanged, because we have got a constitution and we are a democratic country and we respect the rule of law.
There's people that support Cape independence, like Phil, are they traitors?
Yes, he is a traitor and he should be charged and have his day in court, and we hope that he will rot in jail.
If you can change the constitution, would you have him hanged?
Look, the constitution seemed to have some loopholes. So Al-Jama-ah is looking at the constitution to close those gaps, who gives people like Phil the inclination to want to commit treason and secede, the Western Cape to secede from South Africa, and something that we fought for all our life. People gave their lives, and it's completely unacceptable. Also, it's very important for South Africa to be a country in Africa where there is a strong white presence. If the Western Cape secedes, we'll have no more whites in South Africa. All the whites in the other provinces will come to the Western Cape, and South Africa will only have blacks. And we want a South Africa where whites and blacks are living together, so that we are a model for the rest of Africa.
So Action SA believes that it is important to empower the level of government closest to the people that it serves with the necessary powers to effectively deliver that service. And that is why Action SA has always, since its formation, supported devolution of powers on both a local and a provincial level. And our position on devolution was approved by our Senate in 2020. And I want to read to you what our blueprint says about it. It says, we are in support of further devolution of governmental powers by delegating more powers to local governments, assisted by a national government working towards shared national prosperity. But, Donald, because there are so many failed municipalities in South Africa, devolution should be considered only on a case-by-case basis. The issue you raised in the beginning of succession and devolution, it's important to differentiate the two. A lot of people conflate the two, and that's a mistake. So on the issue of succession, Action SA is opposed to succession. We believe that the Western Cape benefits from South Africa benefits from the Western Cape, and Action SA believes that we are stronger as one country.
Just quickly, why don't you join the Western Cape Devolution Group if you're in favour of federalism?
Have we been invited to join the group?
You can most definitely be invited to join the group.
There we go.
When I was 16 years old at Trafalgar High School, I entered a competition with the Lions Club of South Africa, and I won the competition because of the crime situation in the area that I lived, namely Dry Docks in District 6. My essay called for a police state. And now that I have some intelligence, I am appalled at the fact that there are elements of a police state emerging in the Western Cape. So devolving police powers to the Western Cape will accelerate a police state in the Western Cape, and I certainly don't want to live in such a province.
Thank you. Some interesting comments there. I'd definitely rather not be hung, but I'll take my chances if the court case comes. Look, first of all, let's start with the more sensible comments from Michelle. And actually, what's interesting, and I expected this would be the case, we're not very far apart. I think our positions are fundamentally the same, and I think there are a couple of key questions that I would put to Michelle. First of all, does a case-by-case basis mean that the Western Cape is an appropriate government to have the devolution of power? Does it have the skills and the capacity to be devolved? And then secondly, whose decision is it? So I'm completely in agreement. It's about empowering communities and allowing people to have government closer to the people so that they can be better served by government. But ultimately, whose decision is that? Is that the decision of the national majority to decide for those communities on their behalf? Or is it the decision of communities themselves to decide how and by whom they want to be governed? And is that not then exactly what a referendum on either Cape independence or federalism, whatever you want, exactly empowers communities to decide for themselves how they want to be governed? And then for the slightly more crazy comments, which obviously was Hanif. I mean, Hanif, do you not realise what you were fighting for? Did you not realising when you were fighting for self-determination, you were fighting for empowerment, to empower people to be able to choose for themselves how they were governed and not to be dictated to by somebody else? And do you not realise that you've become what you fought against? That actually you now are the person who's now wanting to force your will upon other people. And actually, you're talking about forced integration. We want whites, and they must stay here. We want this, and that must happen. And actually, can you not see the absolute hypocrisy of you running a minority party where you are fighting for the specific rights of your community to have religious freedom, to have a particular diet, to be able to group and meet, and actually then you want to deny it to other people? You and I are the same. We have equal rights, and actually I respect your rights to live your life as you wish, and you must respect the right of the Western Cape people to choose for themselves, and don't think that you can dictate to them what they can and cannot do.
Are you trying to sneak Cape independence through the back door with the Western Cape Devolution Working Group?
No, we're not. Look, so the point of the Western Cape Devolution Group is it's a single issue organisation. So we accept on that organisation is a whole range of groups who have very, very different positions on several things. But what we all fundamentally agree on is we all agree on the devolution of power. And we all agree that a federal state of South Africa is infinitely preferable to a unitary state. And we want to work towards that.
My name is Anele, and I'm from Jama-ah. I have a question to the gentleman there. Will it be fair to say all whites are guilty of apartheid, including those who are not yet born? Clearly, that's not fair. Why would you say all blacks are guilty of what the ANC is doing? That's not fair. Or is it a question of elitism, where others do not want to mix with others? Be careful. Be careful. This is a compromise. There was a compromise in this country. So please be careful and cautious of what we are trying to do. Thank you.
Sorry, just a point of order, a quick point of order. Did he say that all blacks are guilty?
No, it's a rhetorical question.
Well, okay. Thank you.
Phil speaks about forced integration and that people must be able to be separate and live separately. Are there any Afrikaners in the audience? Put up your hands, please. So many Afrikaners. Now, if you take a DNA of the Afrikaners and you take the DNA of members of my community, the Muslims, you'll find that there's a close match. So as far as DNA is concerned, we are already, I don't know if you forced those who came from Indonesia and Malaysia to integrate with the Afrikaners, but let's look at scientific evidence, the DNA. That's why Jama-ah in the next elections is going to target Afrikaners because we are real brothers and sisters.
I want to answer Phil. He asked whether the case-by-case basis means that it would be the Western Cape that is accredited to fulfill certain functions. And of course, we believe that there should be devolution to provincial and local level. So it might in some instances be the Western Cape, but in the future, it might be the Gauteng province, depending on who's governing that province and how well that province is doing. Similarly, in the Western Cape, you have a number of municipalities. Not all of them are functional. Many of them are failing. So you would have to have a look at case by case, province by province, municipality by municipality. And how would you go about doing that? You asked who decides. I think there should be set determined criteria. For example, how many years of clean audits has this municipality had or this province? And to be determined like that, not by a higher structure on an ad hoc basis.
Thank you, Michelle. Just quickly, do you also think people like Phil who support Cape independence are traitors?
I think misguided is a better word.
I'm just wondering, surely there's some kind of a hierarchy in terms of provinces and municipalities. You can't go, the Western Cape province is sort of like determined to have, I don't know, credibility, but then some municipality within that is not. So you're going to have to sort of, the granularity of your supposed choosing who can and who can't is going to have to be quite coarse. You're going to have to say, there are only 9 provinces. So as soon as you choose a province to be, I don't know, federalism worthy, you have to deal with all the municipalities inside there being part of that same decision.
So no, to answer that, you have very specific functions that you have at national, provincial, and local level, and your devolution would move between those. And to give you an example of where, like in the Western Cape, you have some municipalities that are fulfilling a function and not others, you would look at housing. So some municipalities in the Western Cape have got the function of building houses, and in some municipalities that function lies at the province. So it doesn't necessarily have to mean that just because you're a municipality in the Western Cape and because of hierarchical structure, that you would have to fulfill a certain function because you're a municipality in that province.
Look, some interesting points there. So first of all, let me just address the gentleman. Sorry, I missed your name there. I think this is really important. I am something of a rare breed in South Africa. I'm an actual non-racialist, as opposed to a declared non-racial. I really believe in the values of non-racialism, and actually we're just all people, and I don't really care what colour we all are. We're all individual human beings with rights and values. I don't really care what our DNA is. I don't really care. I don't believe that one race has superiority over the other. I don't believe that white people ever had the right to dictate through apartheid, and I don't believe in this modern era that black South Africans somehow have a right to more decide for what white people or coloured people or people of the Western Cape want. Actually, what I think is, and what's lost in this whole thing, and I think with Hanif, it's about identity politics, and I think with Michelle, it's turned into being about administration. And actually, nobody's talking about what do the people want. It's a democracy. It's not about what the administrative rules are. It's not about whose DNA it is or what colour we are or what we agreed in 1994. It's about what do the people who live here now democratically want. That is how democracy works. People must decide, consult the people who are alive now, irrespective of their DNA, their race, whatever, and let them decide for themselves how they want to be governed. That is the basis of democracy.
My name is Faisal Sayed. I'm a television talk show host. I wrote down that one of the drawbacks of federalism could be economic disparities across states. This is usually, there's a phenomenon called the race to the bottom dynamic when we have separate federal states. And by this we mean that some states would want to attract business, and by doing that, they will lower taxes, for example, to attract such business, and they might offer different regulations to attract certain people into their space. And that could come at a social cost. Then, as a proponent for social justice, I would contend that federalism has the propensity or the ability to obstruct national efforts to even out any disparities.
Current practices predict future practices and future behavior. The national government has already devolved millions of rands, in fact billions of rands, to provinces, including the Western Cape. And if we look at how they use, let's call it national funds, the Western Cape has wasted the money. When it came to housing, for example, billions of rand was returned to the fiscus, in spite of the fact that the Western Cape has one of the largest waiting lists for housing in South Africa. No top structures were built for many years. When we look at the issue of sanitation, there is a water treatment plant in Zandvlei, near Makassar, near Gordons Bay, more or less that precinct. That is the same region where the first settlement of Muslims was also started. And the national government has given 5 billion rand to the province, Western Cape province. They in turn devolved the money to the city of Cape Town. And today, if you look at Masiphumelele, which is very close to Zandvlei, 1 million people are dying because, and as a result of the inefficiencies of the city of Cape Town, the African child has to live in sewerage, has to pray in sewerage, has to eat in sewerage, and that is unacceptable.
Yeah.
So if that is the practice at the moment, then it means that Africans living in the Western Cape and College will suffer the same fate, and we will be condemned to living in sewerage. I don't want to live in a sewerage province and give and allow devolution and also secession.
I'd like to answer Phil, first of all, where he said that our position is basically administrative. And I want to say that, of course, it's administrative. It is about the most effective delivery of services to the people of South Africa. So which level of government can deliver the service most effectively? That's the level of government that should be delivering the service. And I want to give an example, and that is that it is clear that the national government is doing an absolutely dismal job of delivering police services. And Action SA really shares the frustration of the people of the Western Cape that we have to live in an environment that is crime-ridden and affecting people every day, where they have to live in fear. So it's unfortunately unlikely with current legislation that policing can be devolved to a lower level of government, because the Constitutional Court has said that it is a national competence. There might be some room for maneuver in national legislation, but ideally one would want policing to move to a lower level of government, a more effective government, where one can actually get the service that one deserves.
Thank you. Look, so just quickly, I think Michelle and I, again, are pretty aligned on policing. And what I'm just going to say is, you've just identified the problem that we want to solve. There's a problem in the Western Cape. We all recognise there's a chronic problem with policing in the Western Cape. We recognise that the provincial government wants to solve it. The municipal government wants to solve it. But actually, the national government is dictating terms to the Western Cape, and we can't stop ourselves being killed, raped and murdered because the Constitution says so and the majority won't allow us to police ourselves. Now, that is a massive, massive issue. And that is exactly the reason why we need devolution, federalism, secession, however we put power back into the hands of the people, because if the people of the Western Cape are allowed to decide on policing, they're going to make a very different decision to the decision that's been made by the national government of the Constitutional Court. And there are some workarounds, and I'll happy to talk to you later, to Michelle, and bring you up to speed and tell you how exactly we can get power of policing, because it's something that we are tabling in the Western Cape Devolution Working Group. Now, coming back to Hanif and his conditions, Hanif, I'm with you 100% on this. People must not live in shit conditions. I absolutely, if you think we want to condemn the African child or the coloured child, then you really, really have misunderstood. You should go read some of the things that I've said. I care passionately, we care passionately for people, and we want to uplift and get people out of that. It's the national government that's created that nonsense, and you're in coalition with that government. You've taken hands with the people who've created that shit. So actually, why don't you solve that issue rather than standing in the way of the people who are trying to solve it? Because we need to lift all the people in this province out of poverty, to give them work, to give them dignity, to give them housing, to give them a better life. And that is actually at the heart of federalism, secession, devolution, whatever it is. It's about improving the circumstances for people, not condemning them to what they're in now.
My name is Ahmad Mputu Mistulweni. I'm a councillor for Jama-ah. I've just forgotten the gentleman's name. Remember one thing, I want to talk about federalism. Federalism, if we take back apartheid system, we will use federalism. And remember, one thing for sure, if you go back to apartheid, the majority of white population will suffer if you go back to federalism. So therefore, Al-Jama states clearly, we do not want such things. That's why the word Al-Jama means community for all. We stand for all communities, not a certain race or people, because we're based on Islamic values and ethos. So therefore, we will never support federalism at all, because that is apartheid on its own. So therefore, please, sir, don't bring us back to apartheid. We will never go back there. Never, never again. Thank you.
So, can I ask, why do you keep seeing me as a white person and not just a person? I'm just a person. Yeah, and every time you talk about me, you keep talking about a white person. I'm just a person.
No, I do understand what you're saying. Sorry if I'm
I'm not across at you. I just want to make the point that we're just people.
Look, there are also coloured people during the darkest days of apartheid that were members of parliament in the Coloured Representative Council. And they wanted to be separate. And when I was a youngster, that time I had very long hair, longer than Michelle, at the time of the Beatles, and a revolutionary at that time. In fact, I was a child soldier since 11 years old, but we're not going to talk about that. So we said as young revolutionaries that when we get our freedom, those colors in the CRC and those in the Indian Council, because many Muslims are also Indians, that we'll hang them. At that time, the death penalty was still around, so it wasn't unlawful to call for people to be hanged. It was acceptable in those days. So it is not for the fact that you calling for secession. We're referring to anyone, no matter what their color is, and we know they were coloreds. And some of them became chairman of portfolio committees in Parliament because of the negotiated settlement. You talk about identity politics. Jama-ah's got Muslim values, Muslim ethos. But this weekend, we nearly took over the mayorship of the city of Johannesburg. And that is an African province, you want to call it like that. So identity politics, Jama-ah is a Muslim party with Islamic values, but we are a platform for all communities. And that's why we want to be together, and that's why we want Ubuntu.
I seem to always be answering Phil. But I have to just point out, Phil, that you and I have identified the same problem, but we have different solutions. And Phil seems to be of the view, like Jacob Zuma is, that the ANC will govern forever. And that's not how we see it. So in 2024, the ANC is going to be below 50%. That's a fact.
Michelle, just a quick point. Zuma believes he's going to govern until Jesus comes back.
Yes.
So not forever.
Yeah, well, we're in a room full of people of different faiths, so let's say until forever.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think from our perspective, what our solution is to the problem is to fix South Africa, to bring the ANC right down to a place where we can, as South Africans, vote them out of power. And it is Action SA's goal to make sure that we vote this incompetent ANC government out of power and install a competent government that gives the services to people that they expect and deserve. And that's our solution to the problem.
Look, I'm glad you've raised 2024. And look, I don't mind you addressing your issues to me. 2024 is a fascinating subject because I think it proves two things. First of all, South Africa is coming out of its delusion, but since the local government elections, South Africa has got collective delusion about what's going to happen in 2024. 2024 is a disaster that's waiting to happen. It is, Michelle, and I'll tell you why. There's only the only two possibilities. Either the ANC control that government, or there's a government with the EFF. They're the only two mathematical possibilities. There is no, look, there's only three parties that had 89% of the vote in 2019. You're going to come in and bring a little bit, but there's no possibility that all of the opposition parties together are going to be able to get enough votes to keep the ANC and the EFF out of power. And that's going to give us one of two options. Either the ANC is going to be in power with some minor parties like Jama-ah, who nearly sort of walked into the mayorship of Johannesburg on the back of a deal with the ANC, which is hardly going to serve the people of Johannesburg very well. Or even worse, you're going to create this coalition, which includes the EFF, and I know that Action SA are quite keen to work with the EFF, and that's going to last just as long as the EFF get the ANC out of power and get leverage so they can walk across the road to the Tuli House and put the ANC back into power on their own terms. And actually, here we are sitting here saying, well, how on earth are we going to create this? We've got to try and cobble together these most ridiculous coalitions with you and the DA at each other's throats non-stop. And actually, somehow, we've got to cobble all these separate interests into somehow to turn them into one force. We don't. We just have to let those people govern themselves. And actually, if the Zulus want to run KZN and they want to have one way, and if the people of the Western Cape want a different system, and if the people of Gauteng want a different system, then let them. And whether that's federalism or whether that's secession actually is a secondary issue. Let the people govern themselves the way they want. And don't make everybody have to club together to try and find the lowest common denominator of an unworkable coalition, because it's going to be a disaster.
So it seems as though people have forgotten something very important. And that is this, that South Africa is a federation. South Africa is a decentralized federation. Look at the constitution to begin with. I don't understand the nature of these conversations or querying about whether or not federation is supposed to transpire. South Africa is, legally speaking, a federal state, one of 3 in Africa. And I must say, the track record for federation in Africa is poor and abysmal, I'm afraid to say. When we look at Nigeria, a nation which has been around for longer than this current republic has been around, for what we see is a nation that has completely crumbled under civil war, under differences of 250 ethno-linguistic people, ultimately all vying for one pot. In the 1970s, with the breakaway of the Biafra Union, who declared UDI and fought against the federal state, millions of people died because that federal state, that unitary state, could not allow the letting go of that piece of land. Why? Because money. Because the truth of the matter is that if the Western Cape was to secede, the nation which we call today the Republic of South Africa would collapse financially, ladies and gentlemen. And this is a matter of fact, whether or not we wish to admit it or not. Now we claim this thing called the unitary state. Yes, this is true in as far as we've seen the centralization of power, where instead of the 3 capitals which we once had, which was supposed to divvy out the power in this country, because we have a very large nation as it currently stands. Anyone who's driven to Joburg in a car understands what I speak of. But where we currently stand is in a federation that is a decentralized federation, where we have a bastardization of basically Canadian human rights and German federal practices and principles, which have been inculcated into our constitution. Now we see the EFF moving forward to move the parliament away from Cape Town to the executive in Pretoria, where the constitutional court is. What we are seeing is a centralization of power, which will ultimately lead to the end of South Africa. But fear not, the removal of the legislature here from this province will free this province.
I want to have a dig at Herman Masaba. Michelle can't get off so lightly. He was the mayor for the DA in the good old days. And then he bought a grabber from Israel to spy on all councillors in the city of Joburg. So when we complained, Helen Ziller wrote to us and said, look, that was Herman Masaba, not the DA. Not saying that he was also their mayor. But coming back to 224, I worked at Nestle as a top gun. I used to make mayonnaise and Nescafe, all the things that you like, Rick Coffee, Milo. I was a big boss there. 7 years before 1994, Nestle sent Mr. Montavon to tell us executives of Nestle that in 7 years' time, Mandela will be president. And I didn't believe him. And I took to my mother, who was the activist. I'm not the activist. And she said, no, he's right. And he was right to the day. So later on, when I get another chance, I will also tell you what I've heard in the grapevine, what is going to happen in 224, and the prediction of Montavon. You will say that Hanif Hendricks' prediction has also come through. But I'll wait for my next chance. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon to all. I do not see any color before me, because in my religion, we see no color, because no person is above another person. No tribe is above another person. So I see all of us as equal. However, there are a couple of things that I'm very concerned about, but I do want to first advise you who I am. I'm Councillor Advocate Shamima Sali. I'm a PR councillor in the city of Cape Town. I have more than 20 years' experience in the Department of Justice, and I have seen the corruption and fraud in justice, and that is why I left the Department of Justice. I'm a proud member of the political party Jama-ah, and I'm the national spokesperson. Some of the things I'm going to say you are not going to like. Our Jama-ah is a political party for all communities, and communities are God-fearing, so that is our basis. Whether you believe in the Bible, or the Torah, or the Quran, or any other religious form, but where you have morals and ethics, and that is our basis, and that is what's lacking in our country. And that is why Cape federalism will not work, because we haven't even started with the ground and our roots. Our roots are corrupt. How many here are on the ground assisting and empowering struggling communities? I am on the ground. I'm seeing what's happening in our communities. I'm seeing the shacks. I'm seeing the lack of education, not just in Cape Town, right through this country. The idea of Cape federalism, why? Because we are lied to about how amazing the Cape is. Working in the city of Cape Town, I see it. Why are we disillusioned about clean audits in the Western Cape? Why don't we see the irregular expenditures, the fraudulent tenders? Just in this week, there was a arrest made in the Cape because of fraudulent tenders. Are you keeping note in the news? When currently there are 3 different tiers of government, and especially the DA, they are unable to work with any other political party. Why? Because the DA is a dictatorship.
Okay.
Public participation in our country, we talk about democracy. When public participation in our country is a farce, how are you going to get the word and the vote and the input of everybody in South Africa? Because that is a democracy, not the foolish democracy that we are believing is currently happening in the Cape and the rest of South Africa.
It makes me sad to listen to Phil, because it makes me realize that there are people who've given up on South Africa. There are people who think that there's no hope. You started off by saying that South Africa is collapsed, and people talk about how it's failed. And I don't think that we should see it like that. I think that South Africa is still a country that has got hope and has got opportunity. I don't think this is a time to retreat into our lagers, whether that's in the Western Cape or whether it's smaller and smaller and you end up sitting in a house in, Bishop's Court, and think that this is where things are right. This is where things are good. So I want to appeal to everyone, don't give up on South Africa. Action SA certainly hasn't given up on South Africa. And if the 19 million people, I think it's 19 million, who didn't vote in the last elections, actually voted, we would have had change. So now is the time. We talk about 2024, and it can be a magical year. It can be a change in South Africa. We have this opportunity. So if everyone registers and goes out to vote and votes for change, we can actually see a difference. And we can have the South Africa that we were promised in '94. So, Phil, don't give up on South Africa. Action SA certainly hasn't.
Just a small technicality. I didn't say collapse. I said teetering on the brink of collapse.
First of all, I'd just like to address the lady. Sorry, I'm very bad with names. As often, I think there's so much common ground between us. I love a country based on morals and ethics. I'm with you 100%. I'm with you 100%. And a country that's based on democracy, I'm with you 100%. And we may have differences on things from there. And actually, whether we disagree on how, at the heart of our fight, and I'm now actually talking about our fight as a secessionist, is the fact that the people of the Western Cape are not governed by the government they voted for, and they've never been governed by the government they voted for in 30 years or 28 years, the majority of them. So I'm with you on democracy, I'm with you on ethics. Michelle, look, I'm just a realist. I applaud your enthusiasm and your positivity, but I have to just give you a word of caution and reality. South Africa has the government it voted for. South Africa has the government it wants. I wish South Africa wanted a different government. I wish that South African voters could see the disaster that's falling around their feet and they would vote differently. But in 2024, the largest single party is still going to be the ANC, and it's probably going to have double the support of its nearest competitor. And that's the harsh reality. And when you think of it, and I'd like you to think of the business rescue process. What happens when you have this big business that's on its knees, it's collapsing, everyone's going to lose their jobs, and actually the whole thing's about to implode? You draw back, you consolidate, you save the parts that can be saved, you shore those up, and you move forward. And for us in the Western Cape, that's where it starts. We're here. We're voting for a relatively functional government. We're outperforming the rest of the country. We're not getting democracy. We want to save where we are, because I'm not worried about the big stuff. I've got 4 children. My youngest are 4 and 6. This is their country. They're going to grow up in it. And I want them to grow up in the future. And I'm not really, the big stuff is almost less important. This is their home and I want to secure a future for them. And unfortunately, if people in the other parts of South Africa want to make really bad political decisions, they must live with the consequences of that. But I don't want to live with the consequences of their bad decisions.
My name is Zola Ngime from the PAC. In the PAC, we have spoken so much about the question of race. And we said there is only one race to which we all belong. And that race is the human race. There is no race which is superior than the other, and there is no race which is inferior than the other. We are all equal, we are humans, equally made by God, and we are all equal before the eyes of God. No race can claim to have superiority over anyone in this earth. So the question of federalism, it just further divides us as humans. It further divides us, and we believe in individuality. It's well and good for people to showcase their skills, their talents, and develop and realize their full potential. We believe in that, but we don't believe in individualism. Because individualism results in ideas like this, to form, groups. We don't believe in groups. We don't believe in groups. We believe in individual. We guarantee individual rights, not groups. So the group mentality, can only bring us back to the question of apartheid. It has been condemned already here, that we can't reverse back to apartheid. You see? And one other thing I want to raise is the question of truth. All leaders here expresses truth, but at the very same time they make, nevertheless statements, If we all believe in truth, let's stick on that. If we believe in non-racialism, let's stick on that. Let us not make, that people says this. No, let us raise the level of people's understanding to the level of truth. That is what we must do, to raise the level of people's understanding to the level of truth, but not further divide us. Okay? Yeah. We foresee a future of peoplehood, not of separate development.
For the past 3 months, we have a think tank with thought leaders that have the ear of the ANC, thought leaders that have the ear of the EFF, and thought leaders of what we call a opposition bloc, which includes Jama-ah. And Jama-ah provides secretarial services to the think tank. That think tank has been responsible for removing the DA speaker. That think tank has been responsible for replacing the DA chief whip in the city of Joburg. So it does have some teeth. Earlier on, I told you about Montavon, one of the economists of Nestle in Switzerland, who told us that in 7 years' time, told Nestle executives, including me, Mandela will be president. So what is this think tank telling me? Because we have a representative and they report to me that in 2024, there will be a co-governing structure of the ANC and the EFF and that bloc. And they will govern. Now the ANC and EFF requires 10 seats. They're not going to make the 50%, according to the people who do number crunching. And I can tell you those doing the number crunching are not the best in South Africa. They are the best in the world. So the Jama-ah is responsible for bringing to the party those 10 seats that the EF and the ANC needs. So that's breaking news, and I hope you appreciate it. Thank you.
Hanif, the Western Cape independence movement thanks you greatly for your honesty. We've been saying that ANC EFF government is our absolute worst nightmare, and the people of the Western Cape absolutely do not want to live under that government. And if you want to make Cape independence an absolute certainty, just select an EFF coalition and you can say goodbye to the Western Cape, and I would thank you for it.
So just a comment, I actually quite enjoyed the idea of morals and values as sort of like a governing idea. So I thought about something which I read recently. It says, with my family, I'm a communist. With my close friends, I'm a socialist. At a state level, I'm a Democrat. And at higher levels, I'm a Republican. And at federal levels, I'm a libertarian. So it just sort of speaks to me in terms of this tug of war between centralization and decentralization. But I think we can all accept that within our everyday lives, we have different structures and thinking about these things. And so to me, it's obvious that power in smaller groups are more sensible, more useful, more controllable, more governable, more ethical, and more value-driven.
When I was at school, I was always taught that the way to score high in an essay was very simple. Answer the question. Now, the actual question today is Western Cape devolution a good idea? So if I could just bring the speakers back to the actual topic at hand. And the actual topic at hand is Western Cape devolution a good idea? And if it's not a good idea, then why isn't it a good idea? So we need to know, what will this look like in real terms? What will policing look like? What will education look like? What will the fire services look like? What will the municipalities look like? That's what we need to focus our attention on, not irrelevancies about race. And for the gentleman in the red cap, if I could just remind him that we share 50% of our DNA with bananas. It's not relevant.
So when I spoke about 2024 earlier, and my views about what is going to happen in 2024, Phil answered me, and he said that he disagrees with me because he's a realist. And I want to say to Phil that I don't agree with him. I don't think he's a realist. And the reason I say that is that if he was a realist, he would realize that secession isn't going to happen. And there are two main reasons for that. And the first is because one would require a constitutional amendment. And while that's possible, it's not going to happen. It would require recognition in international law, and that's also not going to happen. So I invite Phil to the real world and to realism, and I want him to remind him of some stats, which are real stats. So in 2014, DA support in the Western Cape was 59.4%. In 2014, 59.4%. In 2019, 55.4%. That's down 4%. In 2021, 53.4%. So that's down a further 2%. Voter turnout in the Western Cape in 2016 was 63%. And in 2021, it went all the way down to 48%. That's a 15% drop. And as someone described yesterday to me, if you were in a shop and there was a product on the shelf and it went past its expiry date, it's because no one wanted to buy it. So you had a very large number of people who didn't want to buy all the political parties that were presented to them. They couldn't see one that they wanted to buy. And that, Phil, is a good indication of the lack of faith that people have in the current government in the Western Cape. So I think to put your faith in what people want in the Western Cape, that is changing every time we have an election. And I would venture, from my experience on the ground, going to people, visiting in their homes, that the DA is already below 50%. So let's talk about devolution and getting better service delivery. I think that's really important and a worthwhile cause. But let's stop talking about secession and stay in the real world.
I think there may be a misunderstanding that Jama-ah is in bed with the African National Congress. And I need to explain why we have a working relationship with the African National Congress. The African National Congress is the only political party with roots in the liberation movement that still exists in South Africa. And although they are a corrupt party, and the Zondo Commission says so, not me, we cannot, for the sake of our dear beloved liberation movement, let the ANC go away because they have the numbers. They are still the party that gets the most votes in South Africa. So yesterday in the Portfolio Committee on Justice, I, for example, told the Deputy Minister that who the hell does he think he is? And in the same week in Parliament, I told the Minister of Finance that when the IFF and the World Bank ask you to jump, you ask them how high. So there are many other indications to show, that the relationship that we have with the ANC is not an alliance, it's not a coalition. It is because many of our members, and they are members of the Pan-African Congress here, we are very close to the liberation movement. It is a dear liberation movement for us, and we have to face reality that on the one hand, the ANC is the biggest party, and if they go, there's no one left to represent the liberation movement politically.
Which party do you believe is worse, the DA or the ANC?
Definitely not the DA, because the DA wants a return to white rule. And they want to share power without losing control. And they want the Western Cape to be a haven for those who want more illicit financial flows out of our economy, like the mining houses, many of them who are relocating to the Western Cape. And also Amazon is already here. And half of our GDP is being leaving the country through legal, illicit financial flows.
Okay, but is the ANC worse than the DA? Was the DA worse?
No. The ANC has done much more than what the previous apartheid government has done, and it has done much more.
Party.
Sorry?
You're comparing with the National Party, not
That's
the Democratic
correct.
Alliance.
Yeah. When it comes to the Democratic Alliance, I gave you earlier examples of how they institutionalize that African children must live in shoerage. They harm the education of colors in the Western Cape by dismissing our best school principals. And they use the law. The DA is very good at using the courts, because in the courts, you still have magistrates and judges who are still clinging to apartheid.
My comments are mainly directed to Philip, because I couldn't get a chance. To Phil, sorry. You were talking a lot about democracy. But as a Democrat, I'm sure you would understand that this is not an absolute term, but it's a relative term. I'll be quick on this one. As a Democrat, too, you would understand you have procedural democracy and substantive democracy. You seem to be leaning more on procedural democracy other than substantive democracy. Democracy, by its definition, it says majority. Majority, and the majority as per the population makeup of this country, it's black people. And I shudder to think, why are you not attempting any of these parties, Action SA, you, except for the Jama-ah? Why are you not taking as your responsibility to go into these black communities and convince them that you are an alternative? Instead, you are looking for a shorter way to say Western Cape must be separated from the rest, because the makeup in the Western Cape, you have the whites, which are on top, and that's the apartheid social engineering. We don't want apartheid. Neither we want the return to the apartheid. It was a crime against humanity. We can never go there again. Not unless we want civil war.
Okay, thank you. Look, Donald, perhaps I can have a little bit of latitude on time because there's 3 separate questions and I want to get to them all. I'll be very quick on the 2 minor ones. Look, in terms of secession, I have to say, Michelle, we don't need a constitutional amendment. I can happily send you a white paper on the law. We do need international recognition. We've already started some of those conversations informally, and we absolutely can achieve a secession of the Western Cape. But I'm not going to get into that because obviously we're on federalism today. To the gentleman at the back on procedural and substantive democracy, you're talking about majoritarianism. We've got constitutional democracy, which is something different altogether. Substantive democracy means that people are actually governed according to their democratic wishes. And actually, I take great offence, and again, I come back to it, I'm a non-racialist, I take great offence that the people of the Western Cape have to somehow persuade the rest of South Africa to want the same thing, for them to be governed according to their own democratic will. And the majority, this whole notion that the Western Cape is a white-run province is nonsense. 13% of the Western Cape population is white. And actually, anything that we want to achieve through a referendum will require 50% support. And the largest demographic group in the Western Cape is the coloured people, so-called coloured people. So let's move away from that. And we don't need, the people of the Western Cape don't have to persuade the rest of South Africa to want the same thing. We have a right, self-determination, to be governed according to our democratic will. We don't need your permission. We just need to decide for ourselves what we want, and we need to act on it. But let's put that to one side. And then just if I'd like to just move this debate back to where we are in terms of federalism, because a couple of questions asked in the break, that what is federalism? What does federalism mean? So I've got a section of the Constitution here. So just to understand what federalism is. So in the South African Constitution, the national government has control over everything. In the West, we might have a Western Cape Parliament, but the Western Cape, the national government controls what goes on in the Western Cape, except for 2 sections, what's called Schedule 4 and Schedule 5. Schedule 4 is what's called concurrent competencies, which means both the national government and the provincial government are allowed to pass laws and to work on those things. But if there's a conflict between national and provincial government, national government decides. So you can pretty well tear up Section 4, because if the national government doesn't agree with the provincial government, then actually the provincial government doesn't get a say. So we're left then with Schedule 5. This is the list of things that the Western Cape Parliament can control on its own without having to ask permission of South Africa. It's a very short list, and I'm going to read it to you. We have control of abattoirs, ambulance services, archives and libraries, liquor licences, museums, provincial planning, provincial culture, provincial recreation, provincial sport, provincial roads and veterinary services. And that is it. That is what the Western Cape people can decide for themselves. We can't control an economic policy. We can't determine on labour law. We can't decide if we want BE or affirmative action or not. We can't determine pretty much anything. We can't control our police force. We can't determine what the educational curriculum is. We actually cannot control our own lives. We are not governed according to our democratic will. We are governed according to the democratic will of the majority of South Africa, and we have to like it or lump it. And actually, if that's part of the ebb and flow of normal democracy, then you accept that sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But if you end up in a situation which we are now, which for 30 years, the majority of people in the Western Cape have never been governed by the party they elected, we don't have democracy. And actually, we don't have to convince anybody, we don't have democracy.
Thank you for that list of responsibilities that has been delegated from national government to provincial government, who have delegated it further to the city of Cape Town. Now, that is the case in all provinces. And if we look at those responsibilities that have been delegated to the city of Cape Town, we can see that they have not made the cut. The city of Cape Town has responsibility, for example, for liquor licenses. And they are extending alcohol trading hours for nearly 20 hours of the day. And research all over the world has shown that if you increase alcohol trading hours, you increase alcohol harm. And we saw during COVID how alcohol could have prevented people from being treated for for COVID. So the West, so delegating responsibilities like that particular schedule that Phil mentioned, we have seen that the city of Cape Town does not make the cut. And then there's so much corruption in the city of Cape Town. When I was a councillor, JP tabled 2,000 cases of corruption just in the city of Cape Town. More corruption, I suppose, than they have directors and officials. So we are not convinced that giving the Western Cape and the city of Cape Town more powers, that the lives of people on the Cape Flats, for example, will improve. The Cape Flats remains the Cinderella of South Africa.
Firstly, I just want to say to Phil, firstly, I want to seek your forgiveness before the comment already, and hope that we see this that as maybe I'm just a member of parliament for now and I have this stupid immunity that allows me to say whatever I want to say without any repercussions at all. And at the same time, please don't take this personally, but at the moment you are just a personification and an embodiment of a particular philosophy, which I want to address with these poor comments of mine. Two aspects is that one is a question to you, and you can decide to answer the question or not. And that is, I was just wondering, I'm 45 years old. I'm not sure how old you are. So I think we saw some things and we were still growing up, not seeing some things. But I was wondering the fact that you felt that the current government is just taking their terms and conditions and forcing that upon everyone and accepting them to swallow that. I was wondering if you, back in the day, with the apartheid government, felt exactly the same, or if you had spoken out about that. That's number one. And the comment I want to make is that, and this is my personal interpretation of your current thinking, and please don't take it personally, but from what I understand with your thinking that I see at the moment, is it speaks too much of a separatist mentality and too much of insular behavior in terms of behavioral terms. And it is that behavior that forms a basis, or form the basis for apartheid to start bringing forward. So, in the end of the day, I think of Michelle. I can't connect exactly what I'm thinking about when she spoke, but there's an example. And the example is that we as South Africans, all of us together, we went through hell in various issues. Now we stand at a particular precipice in history, coming together through all of that, despite all our color and wherever we come from. And we find that at this point, we are in a boat, and most of us, including myself, as a community activist and media commentator on a daily basis, feel that the boat is sinking a little bit. But if the boat is sinking, I see you, as Phil, jump on that little dinghy boat and want to speed off on your own and leave the others to sink, instead of plugging the hole. And I think we should plug the hole. But while I'm thinking further, I'm wondering if you're on the boat or you're on an island of your own.
First of all, thank you for your comments, and I promise you I take very little personally in the role that I do, and I applaud people who speak honestly and freely, whether it's comfortable or not, and I thank you for your comments. The answer is, I do think it's bad now. I think apartheid was atrocious. I'm British by birth, and I wasn't here during apartheid. But what I can tell you, and I can send you the video, is that when Cape Independence Movement marched, and I led a march in Cape Town, we marched to the District 6 Museum. We stopped, and I led prayers for forgiveness, and we asked for forgiveness and reconciliation for the sins that we committed against the people during apartheid. So I am most definitely, and we as secessionists are not running away from the sins of the past. We just want to create a better future for our children, and your ship analogy is a perfect one. And actually, if we could plug the holes in the Titanic, I'd be plugging with them. But actually, the reality of South Africa is on one end of the ship, you've got people who are trying to plug the holes, and at the other end, you've got people who are drilling more holes in the hull. And the ship is going down. And the only question is, are we going down with the ship, or are we getting on the lifeboat? And Western Cape is a lifeboat. Western Cape Independence is a lifeboat. Federalism is perhaps an alternative. And my challenge to federalists, I'm not actually a federalist, I'm a secessionist. But my challenge to federalists is, I accept that federalism is a compromise that is worth investigating. And my challenge to federalists is, if you want federalism as a compromise that's capable, then do something about it. Because stand up promote federalism, bring a bill in Parliament, promote and ask for federalism. Let's see if we can change the constitution for federalism, and then actually at least you give people a chance to vote for it. But if federalists don't ask for federalism, the choice is the status quo, which people do not want to live in, or secession for people of the Western Cape.
Okay. As a representative of the Cape Independence Party, I find myself in opposition to the concept of federalism. Federalism is a means by which, once given, one finds oneself in a position where a central government has the capacity to say to you that independence and freedom is not something you can have, irrespective if you were to, on a broad basis, on a regional level, be able to prove via a referendum, which I must say, we've not had a referendum in the new dispensation. The last referendum that was held in this nation was in 1992. We do not have a fruitful democracy. We find ourselves in a position where we are finding ourselves in an indefensible position, in truth, where the waters have been washing away at the banks, and slowly but surely this tree of a nation is falling over. But this nation has given birth to new ideas. A new nation can come of this, if we were to choose as such. When we look at Africa, we see only but potential that will rival the rest of the world, if the people of this nation were to choose for it to be so. But which nation is it then that I so speak of? But this is the choice that is being put to us. And at some point, perhaps not in 2024, but definitely within our lifetimes, we will be given the choice, freedom or else.
Thank you. That nation is Western Cape. You didn't, this is a spoiler.
Well, that there is, as I stated, that there is up to people to ultimately decide whether or not they wish to have a future here or elsewhere, as is granted to all people, ultimately.
So I know our topic is devolution, and I'm going to go slightly off topic because I want to answer the gentleman who spoke earlier. I'm a politician, I have to respond.
I know.
So he said that he was disappointed because Action SA wasn't in black communities offering Action SA as an alternative. And I just want to thank him because it reminds me that I must just work harder. I was announced 4 weeks ago as Action SA's provincial chairperson. And where did I go? I went to Khayelitsha. Where was I 2 days ago? I was in Eersterivier. 2 days before that, I was in Khayelitsha, meeting with our activists and our branch chairpersons to discuss strategy about how we're going to spread the message, build membership and build branches. My goal is to have wall-to-wall branches throughout the Western Cape in every single ward. So if you haven't seen us yet in your communities, you will soon. And if you want to build a branch of your own, I'm here. I'll give you my number. Give me a call.
Quickly, Michelle, does the DA care more about cutting grass than caring about the poor?
One word answer.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to refer to the jubilation that was raised by Phil, that now that the cat is out of the bag, the Western Cape won't support Jama-ah because of the co-governing structure that will emerge in 2024. We just want to tell you that Jama-ah, that we are engaging with EFF leaders and ANC leaders who have now come out of the closet. So in 2024, it's going to be a completely new breed. I want to speak about step aside. The ANC was not the first to do step aside. It was the Afrikaners. And they did it, and now they are 10 times richer than they were during the days of apartheid. So they've benefited quite a lot. So Jama-ah, I've referred to the DNA that we share. We want the Afrikaners to come in their numbers and join Jama-ah. We speak the same language. We love the Herzogis. We like the twee gefried cookies. So there's no reason why the Afrikaners can't join Al Jama-ah and we run the country together. Thank you.
So, sorry, Hanif, just quickly, can Christians join Al Jama-ah?
Nearly 1/3 of our members are Christians.
Okay.
1/3 of our councillors are Christians. So while they respect the universal moral values, if I look at our constitution, the first clause in our constitution says that membership are open to anyone who has Christian values, and there's also some others. We talk about Ubuntu. And so, yes, Christians are very welcome in Al Jama-ah, and they play a very important role.
Okay.
The head of our Women's League is Mrs. Willie Latuli, who's a devout Christian, and she's the daughter-in-law of Chief Albert Latuli.
My name is Yusuf Kandawa. I'm a practicing advocate in Cape Town. I've been listening to the panelists and the various proposals and counter-proposals in respect of what we are discussing here today. However, I'm quite concerned, but before I raise my concerns, I would like to congratulate Phil for wanting to come out and make a difference in society, to be able to create a city or a municipality or a country where we can live in a harmonious and peaceful and successful area and municipality or province. Right? I think we're all frustrated, right? And we're all wanting to come out there and make a difference, right? However, I'm concerned about a few things with regards to your proposal, and that is, does secession hold constitutional muster, number one? Number two, chapter 6, section 103 and 104 clearly stipulates the provinces and how the geographical provinces may be amended from time to time or apportioned. Okay, all those things you need to take into consideration. And having a 12th or 13th amendment in Parliament, I don't think how realistic that's going to be in our national Parliament. So I would say, although you're coming up with something good, something positive, but look at what is happening at the moment in our political sphere. Okay, and that is start a party, take over the municipality, throw over the DA, and take over the municipality if that's what you want to govern. Western Cape is what you want to govern. So that's where we are, and that's where you should be in a more realistic fashion moving forward.
Okay, just a couple of quick points. One, just to say thank you for your kind words, and I thank you. And I think it's important that we recognise, whilst we have political differences, there's good in us all. And actually, I can reciprocate in terms of sitting here that I'm mightily impressed. I've got a lot of issues with Al Jama-ah, but I'm mightily impressed that you're multi-faith, and that's something I greatly applaud and thank you. And that's something I've learned today. I wasn't going to touch on the legal stuff, and I'm clearly not going to get dragged into to thing, but I think it's important. It's come up twice now. So let's just quickly talk about the legal basis for secession. First of all, secession is extra-constitutional. Yeah, secession is the rejection of the Constitution. It doesn't take place within the Constitution. It takes place outside of the Constitution. In other words, you're rejecting the authority of the parent state, and actually you're exercising your right to self-determination. And the sections that you need to look in the Constitution are the ones that reference to international law and for the provision of self-determination. So 235 clearly shows that self-determination is a principle of South African law, constitutional law. Section 39.1b says that the Bill of Rights must be interpreted in coordination with international law. Section 231, 2, 3 and 4 all reference the authority of international law. South Africa has signed the international treaties on civil and political rights, economic, social and cultural rights, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and the UN Charter. And all of those guarantee the right of self-determination. And a people, the United Nations have made it clear that a people cannot compromise the territorial integrity of a state they live in. Only other states can compromise the territorial integrity of a state. So the people, so secession is based upon, or would be based upon, the exercising of self-determination of the Western Cape people in accordance with international law, which has authority in the South African Constitution. So that's the legal basis. I accept it's a bit of an aside, but that's the legal basis for secession.
I think it's very important to try and encourage outfits that Phil is associated with, and also political parties in the Western Cape. It is time that instead of seceding and instead of federalism, we should govern. Jama-ah has 3 bills before Parliament at the moment, which the ANC just don't make the cut to do, and we're doing another one on equal pay for equal work. They don't have the cut. It's important that Advocate Dalvai mentioned that people here have a good heart. They are interested in the people of the Western Cape. It's very important that we get together and remove the DA and govern, so that the Western Cape is governed in such a way that that you don't have the reasons that you now want federalism govern. That is what Jama-ah would like to advocate. Let us do what we can to remove the Democratic Alliance and let the Freedom Front Plus, they are mostly Afrikaners, let them come to the table. So Jama-ah hopes to increase its vote of the Afrikaner vote in the 2024 elections. Please don't let us down. If you do that, at the voting stations, we'll have some nice cook sisters for you. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Phil. I have to address you. Please forgive me. You know, I'm caught in a historical moment where our forefathers went to the British, King George to be precise, asking for an intervention into the mess that the British created in this part of the world. Now we have a British citizen. Instead of coming with solutions, you are further putting us back. I'm not sure you know of the pain of what the British soldiers did to the concentration camps. I'm not sure you know of the pain they did to the king of Amaxhosa, Hintsa. But despite that, despite all that ugly history, here as South Africans, we have learned, to live with one another. And your prescription for our solutions, please, my man, please, just be cautious. I'm seeing it's like we are playing with a grenade, but you don't know how to figure out to pull out the pin. The crime stats that you are seeing, we are not happy about it. And we would want solutions coming from all of us as humanity. So divide and rule, please, my man, not again. The mess you did in the 20th century, it will not repeat again.
I think there was some comments about hanging people for being traitors. I just want to remind everybody that secessions happened many, many, many times in history. So if you're going to hang people, you have to go all the way back to the Boston Tea Party and go hang all those people. Because sometimes it just happens that you don't want to live in a society where you're governed by the majority rule. So it happened many, many times. I don't think it's anything special. I think in 1,000 years, this is going to be a dust particle in history. So it's not that special.
I would take this opportunity in my closing statement to thank Donald and Worldview for giving us this opportunity in Wellington. And by the way, in Wellington, one of the leaders of the Muslim community, Dr. Abdurrahman, he was born here, and he served decades as a city councillor. So it is really bringing us back to our roots by bringing us to Wellington. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you very much for the people that are sitting here who have patiently listened to what we have to say. And there is now a diverse number of views which can only help to bring all South Africans together and like I previously said, bring Afrikaners and the Muslims closer together. But we're talking about all South Africans. We're not favoring Afrikaners because we have the same DNA. We just feel that it's very important in the Western Cape to set the example for the rest of the country that we can work together in spite of coming from different faiths, different positions, different beliefs. And we need to strengthen that. We need to show the rest of the country the unity that we have. So if the Western Cape is united, then South Africa will be united.
Phil and Harif, it's been a really great debate. I've enjoyed it enormously. We've disagreed, but I think that we're all looking for solutions. And I think that's a really positive thing. And I'm just so encouraged to be here tonight because we are, and it's already tonight. So we're all from different backgrounds. We look different. We come from different places. But I think everyone here has been talking about being human beings, also talking about finding solutions and making South Africa, in whatever form we see it, a better place for our children and our grandchildren. And I think if we all have that as a goal, then we can only move forward.
A few weeks ago, I was asked to take part in a panel discussion on Zulu independence, and somebody had to keep translating to me and sending me the WhatsApp as most of the debate was in Zulu. What was fascinating is we got together because we had this common view, and they wanted actually to talk to the Cape Independence Movement because the Zulus wanted to have self-determination. They understood we did, and we had this discussion. What was really fascinating to me is in the Cape, we wanted a republic, they wanted a monarchy. We wanted Western law, they wanted African law. We wanted Cape liberalism, they wanted Zulu conservatism. We wanted a heterogeneous society, they wanted a homogeneous society. But actually, there was nothing wrong with either of those two positions. That's the reality. There's absolutely nothing wrong with those two positions. And fundamentally, the people of Zululand must be able to be governed the way they want, and the people of the Western Cape must be able to be governed the way that we want. We need to find a mechanism for that. Now, independence is one, federalism, as we're talking about tonight, is another, and I would repeat what I said earlier. For those that think federalism is the solution, then ask for it. Bring a federalism bill, get off there and bring it as a reality and put it on the table as an option. And when we talk a lot about poverty, we've made this, which is an unfair assumption that Western Cape independence is somehow about marginalising black people or coloured people. It absolutely isn't. And I'm going to say something to you now, and believe it or not, this I absolutely believe is the truth. The quickest way that you're going to see Langa and Khayelitsha and Gugulethu and those places turned into prosperous middle-class suburbs with people living dignity and with lives is through Cape independence. Cape independence will lift everybody's quality of life because we're not looking to leave anybody behind. It's an inclusive movement. And actually, again, I'm sorry, I've strayed on to independence. For federalism, for the federalists, bring it. Give it to an option. If you think federalism is an option, just bring it. But it's about uplifting the people, and don't think it's about leaving you behind. Actually, it's the best chance you've got of being lifted up, because this government, this national government, and an ANC and EFF government isn't going to uplift anybody. And if you don't believe us, let's go ask Zimbabwe how it worked out for them if they take that radical route.
My name is Donald, and you've been watching Worldview.